pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a special meeting this evening. It's a little awkward being in face-to-face after being away for 15 months or so. So I just should have done this at our first meeting, but I want to introduce the board. We have a new member, Andrea Sheehan. We have seen her on camera, but now we get to see her. I guess you'll see, some people will see her live. You know Mary Beth Welch, who is a tenured member. My vice chair is David McSweeney, and Dr. Wayne Saltzman is remote. He is away out of town, but the system is working very well, and Dr. Saltzman is remote. We have other members here that I'll introduce after I make my first remarks, because I want to make sure everybody knows that many of our town officials are here. And my remarks. PFAS is short for polyfluoroalkyl substances. They're chemicals in a class of more than 5,000 chemicals and are found in all kinds of products, from non-stick pans like Teflon, food packaging. They're also in firefighting foam used in military bases, commercial airports, even personal care products like waterproof mascaras and eyeliners and sunscreen, shampoo, and shaving cream can contain PFAS. The issue? PFAS doesn't really break down, and they can persist in our body and in our environment for decades. As a result, more than 95% of everyone in this country has PFAS in their bodies. Recently, we were made aware that our Burlington water supply, as many municipal water supplies do, contains PFAS at the parts per trillion levels. I just want to put parts per trillion in perspective. A trillion seconds is 32,000 years. So these are very tiny amounts. But what does this all mean? Providing insight into that tonight and answering questions about our town PFAS water levels, health concerns, and what we are going to do going forward is our Director of Public Health, Susan Luminello, members of this Board of Health, John Sanchez, Director of Public Works, members of the Select Board are here. I see our chairperson, Mr. Tiggs, who's chairman of the Selectmen. Vice chairman, Mr. Nick Priest, is here. I also see other members, including our town administrator, Paul Sagarino. And I don't know.
Hi, I'm Russ Mackey, I'm the water treatment plant manager.
Thank you all for coming. I also know there are many people online. I posted this on Facebook, and now I know what going viral means. So thank you all. I'm going to turn this over now to our Director of Public Health, Susan Luminello.
Okay, thank you. So I have a presentation to go through. I'm going to go through the presentation, and then at the end, I'm going to let John Sanchez make some remarks, and then go to questions after that. John, I don't know if you want to move, or who wants to move up here. Might make it easier. John and whoever, I guess, is answering the questions, right? Okay, yep. Okay.
Doc, I'll answer.
Okay, so what are PFAS? PFAS are a family of soluble fluorinated organic chemicals. They're both long and short chain. Long chain PFAS are those that have a sulfonic acid functional group made up of sulfur, oxygen, and hydrogen atoms, and contain 6 or more carbons, or have a carboxyl acid functional group made up of carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, and contain 8 or more carbons. Long-chain PFAS are the most commonly found in the environment and include PFOA and PFOS, which are the most commonly recognized PFAS. Short-chain PFAS are those that have a sulfonic acid functional group and 5 or less carbons, or have a carbolic acid functional group and 7 or less carbons. Due to the strength of the carbon-fluorine bonds, both short-chain and long-chain PFAS are resistant to breakdown, and because of their high thermal and chemical stability, they're commonly referred to as forever chemicals. EPA estimates that thousands of PFAS chemicals have been developed and used for industrial and commercial applications since the 1940s. Historically, the primary application of PFOA included protective coatings and the production of non-stick surfaces. The application of PFAS included firefighting foam and water repellent or stain-resistant products. PFAS and PFHXS were phased out of production in the US from 2000 to 2002. In 2006, 8 major companies phased out production of PFOA and some PFOA-related chemicals. Today, approximately 600 PFAS are currently approved for commercial use in the United States. PFAS may still be manufactured in other countries and could be present in materials imported into the US. Due to decades of widespread use, PFOA and PFOS are the most prevalent in the environment and in humans. In 2003 and 2004, the CDC detected 4 PFAS, which was PFOA, PFOS, PFHXS, and PFNA, in more than 98% of blood samples. PFAS have been found in consumer products such as nonstick cookware, stain-resistant carpet and furniture, waterproof clothing, pizza boxes, dental floss, fast food wrappers, microwave popcorn bags, waxes, and paints. Industrial applications such as chrome plating, electronics, manufacturing, and oil and mining operations, and firefighting foams. PFAS accumulates in the environment, such as drinking water, through both primary and secondary sources. An example of a primary sources include industrial discharge, air emissions, and the application of firefighting foam. Examples of secondary sources are landfills and wastewater treatment plant effluent and biosolids. PFAS do not biodegrade, which enables them to impact groundwater, surface water, and ecosystems. Carcinogenic studies are only available for 4 PFAS: PFOS, PFOA, PFHXA, and GenX. Research on PFOA and PFOS has shown adverse health effects at trace levels, which parts per trillion, in laboratory animals. Limited research has been completed for human health impacts. Although there is reason for concern, there are still toxicological unknowns. Very little is known about the majority of PFAS chemicals, including their half-life, toxicity, and bioaccumulation data. What we do know, long-chain PFAS have a longer half-life in humans, greater than a year, and than short-chain PFAS, which is days to months. Therefore, long-chain PFAS take longer to exit the body. However, short-chain versus long-chain toxicity is still under investigation and largely uncertain. Exposure to certain PFAS may lead to liver damage, thyroid issues, testicular and kidney cancer, immune deficiencies, developmental effects, reproductive issues, and cardiovascular effects. Toxicity values or reference doses are based on an evaluation of human and animal studies. In 2016, the EPA established a non-enforceable lifetime health advisory level for PFOS and PFOA of 70 parts per trillion individually or combined. The lifetime advisory level is based on the most at-risk population, which is pregnant and nursing women. This level assumes a drinking water consumption of 0.054 liters per kilogram of body weight per day, which is approximately 1 gallon of water for a 150-pound person. And that drinking water consumption makes up 20% of a person's PFAS and PFOA exposure. In 2019, the EPA established a PFAS action plan. Currently, PFAS is not regulated on the federal level. One aspect of EPA's PFAS action plan was to make a determination by the end of 2019 whether or not to regulate PFAS and PFOA under the Safe Drinking Water Act, and to also consider whether or not to regulate other PFAS chemicals. In February 2021, EPA made a final determination to regulate PFAS and PFOA, and they have 3.5 years to determine the regulatory level. So more to come on PFAS from the EPA. In June 2018, the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, the ATSDR, released new assessments and data on PFAS, which prompted the Mass Department of Environmental Protection to conduct a reassessment of the PFAS guidelines. In addition, other states derived toxicity values for PFAS compounds, which were lower than EPA's reference dose for PFOA and PFAS, which was the 70 parts per trillion. This prompted the DEP Office of Research and Standards to lower their toxicity values, drinking water intake values, and add one additional compound, PFDA. The Mass DEP derived a drinking water standard for 6 long-chain PFAS compounds, which went into effect January 2020. The standard 20 parts per trillion applies to either each PFAS individually or the sum of all 6 PFAS. The MCP, the Massachusetts Contingency Plan used to clean up disposal sites, which governs the cleanup of soil, sediments, and water. In December 2019, the MCP was revised to include PFAS cleanup standards in soil and groundwater at disposal sites, and now requires risk assessments to include PFAS. So we will be seeing that PFAS testing in the future with regards to disposal sites. As part of the new drinking water regulations, all public water supply systems are required to sample for the 6 PFAS. The state is taking a phased approach to testing. There are a total of 1,635 public water supply systems in Massachusetts, which that number includes transient non-community public water systems, which are smaller water systems that typically don't serve the same people every day. They're typically found at restaurants, motels, campgrounds, parks, and golf courses. These systems will be subject to a site-specific health assessment if elevated levels of PFAS are identified. Mass DEP has not set a standard for this group because it's a highly variable group. Of the approximately 1,600 public water supply systems, 614 have been tested. This map shows public water supplies where PFAS-6 were above the 20 parts per trillion. And as you can see, this map is not updated from the DEP's website because Burlington is not yet on the map. This is the schedule for PFAS testing in Massachusetts. So Burlington conducted their first sampling in April with confirmatory sampling in May. Burlington PFAS-6 results. The table shows the testing results for all 6 PFAS at both the Vinebrook and Mill Pond. As you can see, the highest of the PFAS chemicals at Vinebrook are PFOA and PFHXS. PFOA is mainly used in the production of fluoropolymers used in electronics, textiles, and non-stick cookware. PFHXS has been used in stain-resistant fabrics, firefighting foams, food packaging, and as a surfactant in industrial processes. The 3M company was once a major manufacturer of PFHXS and products containing PFHXS, but production was phased out in 2002. PFHXS production has been phased out nationwide, but continues in other countries. Products containing this compound may be imported in the United States. The highest of the PFAS chemicals at Mill Pond are PFOS and PFHXS. PFOS has been used in various industries, including the semiconductor and photographic industries, in some firefighting foams, and in hydraulic fluids in the aviation industry. PFAS has also been widely used in the past as a protective coating for materials such as carpets, textiles, and leather. It was also used in household and industrial cleaning products. And then lastly, which if you can see PFHPA, which is relatively low, but was detected, that's a breakdown product of stain and grease-proof coatings on food packaging, couches, and carpets. So what's next? Mass DEP issued a notice of noncompliance on June 4th. The Mass DEP drinking water regulations require public notification if the level of a contaminant exceeds EPA or mass drinking water standards. They classify these notifications into 3 tiers. So tier 1 is for violations in situations with significant potential to have serious adverse effects on human health as a result of short-term exposure. When we have that, notice is required within 24 hours of this violation. Tier 2 is for other violations in situations with potential to have serious but not immediate adverse effects on human health. Notice is required within 30 days or as soon as possible. Tier 3 is for all other violations and other situations, which wouldn't be included in Tier 1 or Tier 2. The detection of PFAS above the 20 parts per trillion requires a Tier 2 notification, which has been completed. The town is required to submit a written plan of both the short-term and long-term compliance. And I can let John Sanchez talk about the town's plans moving forward and take any questions.
Does anyone have any questions at this point in time? I'll reserve mine till the end, but is anybody online would like have any questions at this point? I want to make sure that they have an opportunity to ask any questions. We have a lot of leadership here from the community, from the town.
They can also raise their hand or put it in the chat box as well.
So Susan, my question is, we felt it was very important to get everyone together and talk about it, that we want full transparency in this community, and clearly we're doing that. You gave us a lot of information. You sent this to every member of the board, and I'm assuming our colleagues have this also. If anybody online would like a copy of your presentation, they can pick it up at a board at the Board of Health office if they call ahead.
Or I can email it to.
That can be emailed. So I want to make sure that if you want to look at this, please call or write or email the Board of Health, and we'll be happy to send this out to you. I'll have some questions a little later, but there are none others.
Well, first, Susan, that was fantastic. That was very educational and informative for myself, so thank you.
We're going now to our Director of...
Thank you, Mr. Weiner, Dr. Weiner, rather. So on our end, and probably the slide that you have, Susan, with the notification time is important because I believe that most of you received that on the mail. And that's what we are actually required to do. Now, we thought it was important that as soon as we receive the confirmatory results that we will make in public. So the same day, pretty much, I think it was the 17th, we went out to, tell the people in Burlington the news. I mean, whether it is good news or bad news or indifferent news, we tried to put them out there because I thought it was important that people know what we have. So we did a press release, posted online, responded to questions, did social media, etc. Now, what have we been doing since then? I guess we want to fix it. We want to fix it as soon as possible. So following that notification, we actually met with the Board of Selectmen and gave them an update on what we thought the next steps will be, which I'm going to describe shortly after. We also engaged the advice of a consultant on possible solutions to the PFAS problem. So we have guidance on what we need to do for that. So I want to start with the easy one. We have 2 water treatment plants in Burlington Lake, Susan stated, 1 groundwater, Vinebrook, and 1 surface water, mill pond. So the first thing we did is we reduced the amount of water we produce at the Vine Brook treatment plant. And we opened the connection with the MW, which thankfully we had completed pretty much in December of 2020, and we joined the authority at about the same time of last year. And I can get into that a little further in the presentation. So we did that, and by eliminating or reducing the use of the Vine Brook, we make sure that we have a consistent flow of that water to at least one section of town where they will not experience PFAS. The important thing about the MWRA is that their water does not have PFAS. So when it came to the mill pond, there was no temporary solution that we could apply to it. So immediately we went into what we need to do next. So obviously we need to design a solution, we need to construct a solution. So right now we have an RFQ open for engineering firms. We put it out a couple of weeks ago, but it's out this week. We met with DEP and got an emergency authorization to apply for financial assistance to Burlington, and we received that, I think it was yesterday or the day before, from them, which is good news. They will finance up to $8 million for the constructions of any system that we may need. And also, we got approval to use ARPA funds for the engineering of that project, which is the new monies that the new administration has put out there. So we have not wasted any time in trying to get these things lined up and going to design as soon as possible. Our goal is to design this project through the summer and come to the town meeting in the fall, which will be in September, get funds, town meeting authorization, so we can go out to bid and start construction through the winter and construction season of next year. So our original goal was to have this system running by the end of the year, next year, that is, 2022. Unfortunately, and I haven't even shared this with Russ today because it just happened late afternoon. I had a meeting with a lot of these communities that have PFAS issues, and we were trying to exchange ideas and process, et cetera. And it seems like there's like a 20-month lead time to get the filters that you need for PFAS right now. So somehow we're going to try to accelerate that on our end, see if we can actually design, go to bid on some. We don't know how we can do this, but there is a huge lead time because you have many communities doing the same thing at the same time. But assuming everything goes well, we will take care of this issue at the mill pond by the end of 2022. Notice I haven't said anything about the Vine Brook. If you recall, a couple of town meetings ago, 2018 was the final vote the town meeting took to authorize the town to join the MWRA. And the idea was that as soon as we have phase 2 completed, there were 2 phases to the project, we will abandon that treatment plant. At the rate we're going, we hope to be completed again by the end of next year with that pipe, which will allow us to start using that capacity and eliminate completely the Vine Brook treatment plant. So that will provide the town with full water, whether the authority's water or town water, that will be free of PFAS. So those 2 projects are moving at the same time. And again, that's the goal, to have it completed by next year. Let me see what else. I think that in a nutshell, that's what we're doing. Pretty much, we went into high speed to get this resolved as quickly as is physically possible. So I'm here to answer any questions.
Chairman, do you mind?
Please.
So, Mr. Sanchez, thank you. You're always great to work with. I appreciate you being here. I know behind the scenes, you guys have done a lot of work and research on this even before coming here today. So I appreciate all the efforts around it. I guess, my simple question, maybe it's more complex, but the filters at the mill pond that you need to get, I mean, it's as simple as that. We just get the filters and install them. And I know it's probably more complicated than that, but is there a special filter that we need to get installed at mill pond, whatever other work we need, and that will fix the issue there?
Yeah, we will have to run whichever consultant we go with will run a test, obviously, first to make sure that the system that we're proposing will work. But it can be seen as simple as that. I mean, we're looking at a GAC filter, granular activated carbon, which seems to be working in other places. There are a couple of other ways to remove PFAS as well. That's not the only one. Reverse osmosis is another way, but that wastes a lot of water. And as you know, water is a commodity in this town, and don't wish to waste a lot of it. And there's also resins that can be used. And in fact, in Massachusetts, a couple of communities have used them, and they have had some issues with them. So we're always in contact with them. We want to see if that may be a solution for us as well. But either way, it will be some type of a filter that you'll have to replace the media every so often to remove the PFAS.
Great. And I already know the answer to this, but I guess for the public, is there other things that residents can do in their home that would solve for PFAS, like carbon filters or those types of things?
So there is. I mean, we recommend people go on our website. We should these website. There are ways to do systems at home, and one of them is a point of entry reverse osmosis system, or either under the faucet one if you have enough room for it. I'm not recommending those systems right now to any resident, only because we are in a fast track to solve this problem. Those systems are expensive, they're complex, and I don't think it's worth it. Instead of spending those funds, if somebody feels that they don't want to drink the water, recommend using bottled water at that point. And again, we send people to the website on DEP because a lot of the bottled water may contain PFAS. So the website has a list of companies that have tested for it. Simple as, and I'm not recommending people to get a filter, but there's been testing done on some of those filters as well. And some of those do remove PFAS, although not as consistent as you would like them to do. So again, that's why I couldn't recommend that. Some of the ones that I have found, they certified that the water will meet EPA standards. Well, our water already meets EPA standards. So I don't know what that's going to do for you buying that filter, since our water is already half of the advisory level that the EPA has. So my recommendation will be bottled water that people know for sure they have checked that it's tested for PFAS.
Thank you.
Questions? I've got a couple that people have called me. Do we know where it came from here in Burlington? Almost anywhere with all of the technology and all of the companies that we've had here, as well as the fact that if it's in suntan lotion, it could be from anywhere. How long do you think it was there? And I have no answers for either, how long and where it came from. Can you give us any insight?
So I will tell you as much as I know. If you remember, again, our conversations when we were trying to abandon the Vine Brook treatment plant because of 1,4-dioxane, the whole issue was that the aquifer is surrounded by sites that are contaminated. So it's not just one or two sites. We have many sites all around the aquifer. So it'll be very hard to determine which site particularly is coming from. When we tested the wells, all of them had PFAS. It's not that we can just point like, oh, it must be this one right here. Including, I believe, wells 1 and 2, which are
interesting.
near the school, which is totally outside of what you would have thought that maybe there will be contamination. So it's hard to tell, but we know there was an industrial area. We know what they used to manufacture there. So chances are that the ground is contaminated. The mill pond water, however, we were caught a little by surprise, I will say, because we were not really expecting anything there. I mean, the aquifer, we know how polluted it is, sorry to say it, but not the river. So we went as far as testing the raw water in Billerica all along the way through the process, through the reservoir, to the intake, through the plant, and out just to see if there was something that we might have been introducing within the treatment process. There's so many things that we do to treat, and it was the same levels at every one of those points. So we will be doing, we have the bottles already to do some testing. We're going to be in coordination with DEP. We're going to locate certain points along the river going upstream to try to determine where this may be coming from. I mean, the river starts at Hanscom, but also there's a section, which I forget what it's called, in Bedford, of a brook that joins the river.
Springbrook,
Springbrook, where,
and there was Elmbrook, I
where there is known contaminated sites there as well, so we don't really know, but we're gonna be doing that exercise because I think we'd like to know where you may be coming from, so we'll be doing that shortly.
I think people need to understand that we pump water into the reservoir from the Shawshene River.
right.
Yeah,
When the
that's
flow
correct.
permits.
That's correct, so. So I really couldn't give you an answer, but that's what we've done so far.
First, I thank you for coming and thanks Ed for having this session. And I think what I've been hearing and what some of the calls I got is about the communication, the transparency in providing the information. So I think this is great that you're in this front of this board and that the select board's here and employees of the town. And I know you said that you're going, you have a schedule, you have a plan to go in front of town meeting, but if throughout the summer, throughout this process, attending a select board meeting or the Board of Health meeting and providing that information throughout, I think that stops, as you said, Ed, going viral on Facebook or giving all that information to the residents as much as you can and just having that open communication. I think you already do that, John, but just maybe just increasing it a little bit. So I think
So, no, I appreciate that, and we do that. I mean, there's a certain level that you don't want to do too much of it. I'll always know to pay attention to it. We will continue to have to send letters to all the residents quarterly. That's part of the regulation. But I will certainly continue to update our residents as soon as we have anything. We find Facebook very effective as far as getting the information out. I'm just talking about the information given.
being the facts.
What happens after we get patrol, but
Right.
so we find it effective. So as soon as we have information, we'll put it out there as we go through the process. Again, to design and build a solution to it.
And I want to acknowledge, we have the chairman, the vice chairman of the select board, as well as our town administrator here, Mr. Sagarino. They're concerned, they're here. This is full transparency to the community. Would you like to make comment or at all, or this is the chairman of the select board, Mr. James Tigas.
Thank you, Dr. Weiner. Just a couple of things. One, I just want to make sure the residents know this is not just a Burlington issue, as John has stated. Many cities and towns are dealing with this. We're going to deal with it. What I love is the fact that you called this meeting and had us here because not all, but most of the decision makers are in this one room right now, which is great because we're going to work as a team. As John stated, Facebook and people asking, when can we join the MWRA? Well, that process started years ago. We're already in that process. And we're years ahead of what we thought was going to happen. So the residents, I just want to reassure them that we know that and we are doing that. We started that process a couple of years ago. We will attack this issue as a team. And I also want, if residents want to put, I think communication and Selectman Priest has a great idea for communication plan. If the residents want to spread the word, all I ask is they spread factual information, and there's a lot of innuendos and misinformation that's going out on social media. DPW has the answers, Board of Health has the answers, and maybe even the select board's office has the answers. But please don't presumptuous and form your own opinions and pass it on, because you know what happens when people do that. They tell one person, then they tell two people, then they tell two people, and it just be factual. That's all I ask. But I just want the residents to be reassured. We are working on this. We take this very, very serious. We're going to work as a team. This is an example of that. And we'll get you to the best solution the fastest way possible.
Thank you very much. Do we have anybody online who would like to ask questions?
Yeah, we have some comments that I would,
I think Nick wants to, would like to say something, Vice, please.
Thank you. I agree with what Chairman Tigas said. I just wanted to add, I think that what we're all seeing here is a trend from the state, that they are re-regulating various chemicals. And I think that this is the group of people, the select board, Board of Health, all the staff involved, to put our heads together and say, are there any larger systems that we need to be thinking about down the road to capture and consider for other things that may be re-regulating downward, right? One of the biggest things that I saw online and through conversations with folks was people who were referencing what Europe is doing, right? How even though Massachusetts is at 20 parts per trillion, and New Hampshire just came out and said 12 parts per trillion, Europe has set a 2.6 standard parts per trillion. So if the people of Burlington are that concerned around just that difference, what else is coming down the road that we need to be aware of? So any pre-thinking that our boards would like to do in conjunction with each other, I know that myself and Chairman Tigas both feel that we would be open to those conversations. And that is something that we should be doing together for sure. But I just want to come up and say that, and thank you folks for holding this special meeting, and bringing Susan and John together for basically a joint presentation to make sure that we're all on the same page, that the residents are on the same page, so that we're getting the right information out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
so Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to make a comment and based on some of the comments that I'm seeing coming through the chat. So I think what people need to understand is that there's a lot of contaminants of concern. And we don't know what they all are. We've heard PFAS has been talked about for many years. It's being studied now. It's still being studied. So whether or not the 70 parts per trillion, the 20 parts per trillion, the 2.6 parts per trillion, what is the best number? That's something that still needs to be looked at and researched to figure out, what that number should be. But Massachusetts has started that process by putting in the 20 parts per trillion. EPA started the process with the health advisory guideline. Massachusetts, according to that recent report that came out, the report that came out in 2018 after the EPA standard, their Office of Research Standards looked at that report and decided to tweak that 70 parts per trillion to the 20 parts per trillion. So, like I said, there's many contaminants of concern. Years ago, 1,4-dioxane was a contaminant of concern. There was no regulatory level for that. Or there was a regulatory level, and then when we found out more information, that regulatory level changed. This is very similar to that. This is an upcoming contaminant of concern. It's something that we could not foresee what the numbers were going to be, what the research was going to come out as. So we go by, and John may want to speak to this a little bit more because, or Russ, but we're given standards by Mass DEP, drinking water standards, and those standards are based on research that is done on these contaminants. And EPA research or DEP research or the most recent research, that's where they get the numbers. And that's the levels that we use, that we're required to use. So this PFAS coming up, there was no standard before this, no regulatory standard. This is the beginning of that. That's why we're seeing so many people, so many water systems fail the standard, because there was none before. One of the questions was, what is this compared to previous, as a comparison, what were the values from the past years? Well, there is no values from the past years because this is the beginning of the regulation, the beginning of the testing. We haven't tested for this before. This was, go ahead, John.
Sorry, I just want to jump in that too, because similar to the 1,4-dioxane and now with PFAS, there were no way to get to parts per trillion before. So even though we tested, and I think we tested in 2015.
Yes, it's part of use.
It was non-detect because the methods available at the time didn't allow us to go that low.
Parts per billion.
Parts per billion compared to parts per trillion. And if you recall, 1,4-dioxane was similarly. We used to test on parts per billion, and then they made the standard 0.3 parts per billion. So as they are able to have new methods for testing, now new standards come about.
Yeah. And you can expect probably to see this, with other chemicals as we move forward, as the testing gets better, as we know about other chemicals of concern, which we can't test for every single chemical that exists in the world because there's so many of them. So the chemicals that we do have the research on, that we do know that we should test for, those are the ones that the EPA and the DEP says, this is what you should test for, and these are the standards that you should use, and those standards change. So just to go over, just some more of the questions that I'm seeing in the chat here. What are we doing to reduce the PFAS? Again, I think John addressed that. The long-term plan for that. I think everybody, not just the town of Burlington, the state of Massachusetts, the United States, we need to be looking at this as an issue. Everybody needs to look at this because we need to reduce the use of these chemicals in all of our products. It's a huge issue for everything. This is not just a Burlington issue. How many towns exceed the guidelines in Massachusetts? That's a question from Ram. I think I said there was approximately 1,600 water systems. That includes the non-transient water systems, smaller systems for hotels and campgrounds, things like that. And of those 1,600, I think I said 600 or something did not pass. So I don't know, John, if you know municipal water supplies, what the number is. This is the number that I got just recently from the Mass DEP website. I don't know if you have any updates.
I don't have the number. I will tell you that it's only going to grow because next quarter, there's going to be more systems. They do it by population. So the next round, it's going to be lesser population. So a lot of those systems are going to be caught in that same web that we are. And the other part is too, even if some communities will not show that they exceed the limit right now, is because they have shut down their production altogether and imposed full water bans. If they may have one or two wells that do not have PFAS, so those are the only ones that they're using, and they shut down everything else. So there's a combination of things happening throughout the state when it comes to it, but there are many, many, many systems, and like you said, the map is outdated. We can't even have the full number yet, but it's a lot of us, unfortunately.
Yeah. Another question, again, why did the town wait? We should have acted sooner, those type of comments. Well, like I just said, we test for the chemicals and at the levels that we're told to test at from Mass DEP, and that's from research that Mass DEP does, and it's done by the EPA. We don't so in other words, we're not pulling chemicals out of the air and levels out of the air. This all comes from scientific research that's done by larger scientific organizations. Another comment, are there dangers to using the water for showers and baths? And what recommendations do you have for residents while waiting for town to address? So I think the showers and baths, you're not ingesting the water, of course. And so that's okay. Recommendations for residents, John, I don't know if you want to, but it's mainly for nursing and pregnant women and immunocompromised to use the bottled water. And like we said, it's also on the Board of Health website, that DEP list of bottled water that's been tested that does not have PFAS. Of course, they haven't tested all the bottled water, but they probably tested some of it. This is some of the bottled waters that don't have PFAS. So they could take a look at that list. We're not recommending filters because filters, they're manufactured to the 70 parts per trillion, which is the EPA health advisory. Again, that is not a regulation. And we're talking about 20 parts per trillion. So you're probably not going to get down to that 20 parts per trillion. And we don't know if you would because they've only been tested to the 70 parts per trillion. So let's see back here. Is there any discussion of solely using MWRA water as Burlington's water source?
So if I may, during the process of joining the authority, there were many of our residents who actually were against the town joining the authority. But as we went forward through the process, the town meetings had a committee. And I believe it was 2017, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was 17. And we spent a lot of time figuring out what the best solutions for Burlington will be. And the solution that they recommended, which I fully support, was to maintain one treatment plant, hence the mill pond, because that will allow us redundancy. We wanted to have our independence in case there were any issues with the MWA water, we could take care of ourselves during any type of an emergency. You may recall in 2010, the MWA had a massive break in the boil water order in the whole metropolitan area. And we were, in fact, we at that time, this is before PFAS and before 1,4-dioxane, we actually gave water to our neighbors, some of their other communities, because they shut down their border at the line and they took our water for that period of time. So we think that's the best solution for the town of Burlington, to maintain our own water supply and supplement it with the MWA water and treat obviously as our water as necessary. However, is a full redundancy system. The goal is once that we complete the project, which it was phases 1 and 2, 2 was split up into 2A and 2B to make it go faster. And as I explained at a town meeting this year. But the goal is that once we're complete with that project, that new line that basically goes all the way to Arlington, we'll be able to supply the town in the worst conditions as far as demand, the highest demand that we may have, in case that our treatment facility had any issues whatsoever, whether it is breakdown or maybe contamination, if that was the case. But no, we have not recommended that we go solely with the MWRA.
Okay. Next question, do we know how many of our residents are enrolled in the emergency alert, text, email system? If it's not the majority, what is the plan to try to get more residents to opt into the alert system? So I'm glad this question was asked, because people need to understand that the alert system goes to landlines, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, but it goes to a landline. If you want it to go to your cell phone, your email, your text, you need to sign up for it. And there's a place on our website where you can sign up and put in all the information that you have to go opt into that system, so that we can call you in an emergency. Now, this is, like we already said, this is a 30-day notification. So this is not, the PFAS is not an emergency notification. This was 30 days. There was notices sent around to all of the households, correct? Within that 30-day time frame. And like John said, they're going to continue to send those notices as required. You will get them in the mail. You won't get them through a phone call through the alert system, like recently when we had the boil water order, which is a tier 1 and requires immediate notification. This is not that situation. But again, if you want to make sure your phone numbers are correct in the system, you can go onto the website, put in the phone numbers, or is there a place they can call Paul about making sure they're in the system if they're not able to access the website or something?
IT handles that, so
Okay.
if they want to check, it's still in the system properly. They can check.
Okay, so they could check with our IT department to make sure that they're still in the system. So this is from, oops, there was another. Okay, so this is from the same person who asked about the MWRA. Thank you for your response. Is there a map or resources that shows which water source our home is receiving based on our address? When we connect to MWRA, do we know what neighborhoods will be receiving that water versus the Mill Pond water?
No, we have the ability to run analysis of a hydraulic system. We do have a hydraulic model. This varies so much by season, by day, by time of the day. So to say, I can tell you this, if somebody lives right near our connected line in Lexington, there will be MWRA water. If somebody lives right on near our Mill Pond, they will receive Mill Pond water. But in between, it's very difficult to actually predict which ways the water moves throughout the day and throughout the seasons.
But again, by there'll be a system put onto the mill pond water by, I think you said, end of 2022, that will be taking out the PFAS. So, and that's all the questions. Is there any more on Facebook?
Most of them
Were already answered? Okay.
similar to the ones you just.
Are there people online who can unmute? Is that a possibility?
Does anybody want to unmute online, speak? Oh, Sherry.
Hi, this is Sherry Ellis. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Sherry.
Oh, great. Thank you. I want to thank the Board of Health and certainly the DPW and our town select board for getting together to talk about this and all the great information you provided, Susan. That was good. And I appreciate all the effort going into filtering the water from the town side. We're our own worst enemy in polluting the water. So is there something that either the Board of Health or DPW could put together that would give us, similar to your presentation, Susan, all the things that maybe we should stop using or minimize using that we're putting the chemicals into our water? So is there things the town can do to reduce some of these contaminants rather than in addition to also, filtering them out? So that was my thought. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I'm afraid that that's a really long,
Unless,
yes,
it's a great idea.
yeah.
Right.
And I,
Be nice.
And these chemicals, for the most part, have been banned and are no longer, but they are coming in from abroad. We do know that.
right, well, that's just the 6 that we're talking about. We're only talking about in testing for 6 PFAS chemicals. There are hundreds.
6 today. They could change that, we could have 60 next year or 2 years.
I think that we have to use common sense. We are pretty much, as a community, completely sewered. So we don't have putting things down septic systems. We're pretty aware of, you don't put things like gasoline and oil and spill those types of things. You don't use materials that that are going to be hazardous long-term. I mean, we have an environmental engineer placed on the Board of Health at the request of town meeting 40 years ago, just to assist in those areas. And we have an excellent environmental engineer. And maybe that's a topic that we should discuss. Maybe it isn't as obvious to the public as it is to us, because we live it every day. I think it's a great question, Shari. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for putting the word out. I know you did that, so thank you so much. But I think that's a topic that we've got to look into, and we should think about it. And maybe a basic on the ABCs of what not to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, I think at the very least, maybe something that Christie could work on would be, how do people get the information as to how do I know that PFAS is in these products that I'm using? Because we're talking about it in water, we're also getting exposed in so many other areas, not just from the water.
And not just PFAS. There are a lot of other chemicals, a lot of other insecticides, a lot of herbicides, a lot of other things that we need to be very careful about. So unfortunately, we gave our environmental engineer, who's very capable, very good, some work to think about and put together. Sorry, but I think it's a great question, Shari.
It normally happens if you're not here, but you were here.
I was here, yeah. So I have one question. Regarding the filtration systems or these, I'm not actually even sure if that's the right way to call it that, but is there only one particular company that has a 20-month lead time? Are there other manufacturers of this particular filter that we should be looking at in parallel to what we're going to go through this summer?
No, there are several companies that make this product, and also the media, the activated carbon, is many companies will sell it. But if those companies like you have to make X amount per year, and all of a sudden that number is a lot higher, then it's harder to, that's why the lead time. So it's not from one company, it's from many.
So you don't foresee us needing a backup strategy for that particular device to meet the 2022 goal?
No, I made it clear that right until now, we were shooting for the end of 2022, and late this afternoon, that's when I just learned that there's a whole backlog.
Okay.
So we're gonna have to go back and see if there's ways that we can expedite that throughout this process. But right now, as of right now, that's what I learned today, that there is a backlog on filters in general, not just this.
Well, I think it's everything. I think, coming out of this COVID, we're seeing that in a lot of areas, but this being a particular concern and importance, I was just curious.
And one thing to emphasize, when I first started college a lot of years ago, and I thought we were measuring parts per million, I said, wow. And then mid in my career as a scientist, parts per billion, this is just amazing. We've gone to the moon and we can measure parts per billion. And just recently, we're talking about parts per trillion. And we have what I call the Burlington issue. Every time we look closer, as we look closer in the microscope, we find things that we didn't know was there. And there are a lot of funny analogies, but it's really a sad that we thought we were going to totally clean up this town in the part per million situation, and we did. And then we saw parts per billion and this still thing. We're finding new things all the time. And this community is not alone. Every community that has a gas station, I was once told, has an issue somewhere. Every community that has something industrial. Every community that has people, there's something that's leaked. And we're only finding these things. We're our worst enemy and in many ways, because we don't know what we don't know.
Mr. Chairman, just one more comment from, somebody clarified Jennifer Peterson. She looked on the website and she said 600 have been sampled. 53 of those were public water systems over 20 parts per trillion. So there's 53 right now that we know of the public water systems.
Thank you very much for that. Dr. Saltzman, are you still on? Do you have any questions? Did we lose him? Okay. If there are no other questions, either online, in the chat box, anybody else would like to ask, not take your mute button and turn it off? I see a lot of very important people here. Ram, I see you. If anybody would like ask a question, please. This is your opportunity. We want to be as transparent as we possibly can. If there's nobody else, I want to thank everybody. Thank you. We have the leadership of this community in this room, and we're all concerned, and we're all doing the best we can. Mr. Sanchez, I've told you many times, I thank you for all that you do. I say that to the vice chair and chair of the select board, Jim and Nick, thank you for everything you do. And Mr. Sagarino, you are unparalleled. The joke here was that at every report, Susan Lambert would say numerous calls from Dr. Weiner. I think that Mr. Sagarino got the same from me over the pandemic.
Just quickly say, you're giving everybody credit, but I hope the residents realize what you've done over the last, how many years?
Almost 33.
So this town was a lot more contaminated before you started. So over your 33 years of service to this town, you yourself have made this town a much cleaner place. And I want to thank you for calling this meeting, because this is what we need to attack these multifaceted issues. So I wanted to thank you. I'm sure everybody else feels the same.
Coming from you,
And for the town.
thank you so much. Thank you. With that, I'm going to close this meeting. Do I have a motion from the board to adjourn?
So moved.
I have a motion from Mary Beth Wells, second from?
Second.
Second from Ms. Sheehan. All in favor? Aye. I don't think Dr. Saltzman, are you on? If not,
I don't think he's on.
4-0. With that, good night, everybody, and thank you for joining us.